Gas just hit $3.72 per gallon, and it is going higher. If you think this is as bad as it gets, you need to see the math, because analysts are predicting $5 gas within weeks, and the numbers back it up. 3 weeks ago, gas was $2.93. Today, it is $3.72. That is an 80-cent jump in 21 days, the fastest increase since Hurricane Katrina in 2005. But Katrina was temporary. The hurricane passed, and prices came back down. This is different. This is a war with no end date, and every single expert is saying the same thing. If the Strait of Hormuz stays closed, gas will hit $5 per gallon or higher by April. Subscribe immediately, because this is about to hit your wallet harder than you think. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why gas prices are exploding, the real math behind how high they could go, what it means for your budget, and what you can do to protect yourself financially. Let me start with the basics, because you need to understand how oil prices translate to gas prices. Gas prices are determined by 4 main factors: the cost of crude oil, which is about 50 to 60% of what you pay at the pump, refining costs, which add another 20 to 30%, distribution and marketing, which adds 10 to 15%, and taxes, which vary by state but average about 50 cents per gallon. Comment below what you paid for gas the last time you filled up your tank. The biggest driver is crude oil. When oil prices go up, gas prices follow within a few weeks. Before the Iran war started on February 28th, crude oil was trading around $70 per barrel. Today, it is around $103 per barrel. That is a 47% increase, and gas prices have gone up 27%. The math tracks. Now, here is where it gets scary. Oil analysts are saying if the Strait of Hormuz stays closed for another month, oil could hit $150 per barrel. Some extreme predictions say $200. Share this video with anyone who needs to start budgeting for $5 gas. Let me show you the math on how that translates to gas prices. For every $10 increase in crude oil prices, gas goes up about 20 to 25 cents per gallon. This is a pretty consistent relationship that has held true for years. So if oil goes from 103 today to 150, that is a $47 increase. Multiply 47 by 0.025 and you get about $1.17. Add that to today's price of $3.72 and you get $4.89 per gallon, basically $5. That is not fear-mongering, that is just math. Type ouch if that math just hurt your wallet. And that is the moderate scenario. If oil hits 175 or 200 like some analysts are predicting in a worst-case scenario, gas could go to $5.50 or even $6 per gallon nationwide. In expensive states like California, where gas is already over $4.50, you could be looking at $7 or $8. Now let me explain why oil prices are going up and why they might keep going. The Strait of Hormuz is closed, not literally blocked with a physical barrier, but Iran has made it too dangerous for commercial tankers to pass through. They have launched missiles at ships. Subscribe if you want to understand economics, not just hear talking points. They have deployed mines. They have threatened to attack any vessel connected to the U.S. or its allies. So shipping companies made a decision. It is too risky. Most tankers are anchored outside the strait waiting for the war to end. Some are rerouting around Africa, which adds 2 weeks to the journey and massive costs. Either way, about 21 million barrels of oil per day that normally flow through the strait are not reaching the market. The world produces about 100 million barrels per day. Demand is also about 100 million. So losing 21 million barrels creates a 21% supply shortage. Hit that like button if you remember learning about supply and demand in school and are seeing it play out in real time. When you have a shortage, prices go up fast. That is exactly what happened. Oil went from 70 to 120 in the first week of the war. Then it dropped back to 103 after countries released oil from emergency reserves, but it is still way higher than before, and unless the strait reopens, prices will climb again. Now let me tell you about the emergency reserves, because this is important. Over 30 countries agreed to release 400 million barrels of oil from strategic reserves. The U.S. alone is releasing 172 million barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Comment below if you think the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is being used correctly. The SPR is an emergency stockpile kept in underground salt caverns in Louisiana and Texas. It exists for exactly this kind of crisis. Releasing oil from it makes sense, but there are 2 problems. First, 400 million barrels sounds like a lot, but the world consumes 100 million barrels per day. So the entire release is only 4 days of global consumption. It helps a little bit, but it does not make up for losing 21 million barrels per day from the strait. Second, you can only release reserves once. The U.S. had 364 million barrels before this release. Share this if you think we are using up our emergency supplies too fast. After releasing 172, we will have about 192 million left. That is the lowest level since 1984. If this war drags on, Trump might have to release more. But at some point, the SPR runs empty. Then we have no emergency cushion at all. And if there is another crisis on top of this one, we are screwed. Now, let me break down what $5 gas means for your personal budget, because the impact is bigger than you think. The average American drives about 12,000 miles per year. The average car gets about 25 miles per gallon, type flying, if you have a trip planned and are worried about ticket prices. So that is 480 gallons of gas per year. At $2.93 per gallon, your annual gas bill was $1,406. At $3.72, it is now $1,786. That is an extra $380 per year just from the increase so far. If gas hits $5, you are looking at $2,400 per year. That is an extra $1,000 compared to 3 weeks ago for one car. If you have a family with 2 cars, double it. $2,000 extra per year just for gas. Subscribe if you are feeling the squeeze and want strategies to deal with it. That is money not going into savings, not paying off debt, not going toward your kid's college fund, just burned up in your gas tank because of a war happening thousands of miles away. And there is nothing you can do about it except drive less or buy a more fuel-efficient car, which most people cannot afford to do right now. Now, let me talk about the ripple effects, because gas prices are just the beginning. Diesel is even worse. Diesel just hit $4.99 per gallon, basically $5. Diesel matters more than most people realize. Every semi-truck on the highway runs on diesel. Comment below if you have already noticed groceries getting more expensive. The truck that delivered food to your grocery store, the truck that brought packages to the Amazon warehouse, construction equipment, farm tractors, trains, most of them run on diesel. When diesel prices double, the cost of moving every product in the economy goes up, and those costs get passed on to you. A typical semi-truck gets about 6 miles per gallon. A long-haul truck might drive 100,000 miles per year. That is 16,666 gallons of diesel. At $3.65 per gallon, that was 60,800 in fuel costs. Hit that subscribe button if you are tired of everything getting more expensive. At $5 per gallon, it is 83,330, an extra 22,500 per truck per year. Trucking companies are not going to eat that cost. They pass it on to their customers, and their customers are Walmart, Target, Kroger, every company that makes products you buy. Grocery stores get deliveries by truck. When trucking costs go up, grocery prices go up. A study from 2022 found that a $1 increase in diesel prices leads to about a 3% increase in grocery prices within a month. Diesel just went up $1.34. Share this if you think inflation is about to get way worse because of oil prices. That means grocery prices could go up 4% just from diesel costs. Add that to the existing inflation we already have, and you are looking at significant increases in your food bill. Construction is another area that gets hit hard. Every piece of heavy equipment on a construction site runs on diesel. Excavators, bulldozers, cranes, dump trucks, cement mixers. When diesel prices double, construction costs go way up. New homes get more expensive to build. Roads cost more to repair. Infrastructure projects go over budget. And who pays for that? You do. Type diesel if you are realizing this is going to make everything more expensive, not just gas. Through higher home prices if you are buying, through higher taxes if it is government construction, through higher rents if you are renting because landlords pass on their increased costs. Airfare is also going up. Jet fuel is basically refined kerosene, which comes from crude oil. When crude prices double, jet fuel prices double. Airlines are already adding fuel surcharges to tickets. A flight that cost $300 a month ago might cost $400 now. And it will keep going up if oil stays expensive, business travel gets more expensive, family vacations get more expensive. Even if you are not driving, you are still paying for high oil prices every time you fly. Comment below what you are cutting from your budget to deal with higher costs. Now let me tell you what the government is doing and why it is not enough. Trump announced the U.S. will release 172 million barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. We already talked about why that is not enough. He also approved new offshore oil drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. He is pushing U.S. oil companies to drill more. He is cutting environmental regulations to speed up approvals. The U.S. is already the world's largest oil producer at about 13 million barrels per day. But there is a limit to how fast production can increase. You cannot just drill a new well overnight. Subscribe if you think understanding this power shift is critical for understanding the future. It takes months to plan, permit, drill, and bring a new well online, so increased production will not help this crisis. It might help 6 months from now, but not today. Trump also announced the U.S. will temporarily allow countries to buy Russian oil that is already at sea. Since 2022, the U.S. has had sanctions on Russian oil to punish Russia for invading Ukraine. But with the Strait of Hormuz closed, the world is desperate for oil from anywhere, so Trump is giving a 1-month exemption. Russian oil that was loaded onto ships before March 14th can be sold without violating sanctions. Hit that like button if you have been thinking about solar or an EV, and this crisis is pushing you to do it. This brings maybe another 1 million barrels per day to the market. Again, it helps, but it is not enough to replace 21 million. Now let me tell you what is coming next, because there are 3 scenarios. Best case, the Iran war ends in the next 2 weeks. The Strait of Hormuz reopens. Oil tankers start moving again. Supply comes back online. Oil prices drop back to $70 or $80. Gas prices drop back to $3.20 or $3.30. Not as low as before the war, but way better than now. This is possible, but requires both the U.S. and Iran to agree to a ceasefire very quickly. Share this video if you think this crisis could spiral out of control fast. Based on current rhetoric from both sides, this seems unlikely. Middle case, the war continues for another month or 2. The strait stays closed. Oil prices hover between $100 and $120 per barrel. Gas stays between $3.70 and $4.20 per gallon. Diesel stays near $5. The global economy slows down but does not crash. This is the most likely scenario based on current trends. Neither side is winning decisively. Neither side is ready to negotiate. So it just grinds on, and we all pay higher prices for months. Type trust if you think trust is the foundation of alliances, and Trump destroyed it. Worst case, the war escalates. Trump follows through on his threat to bomb Iran's oil infrastructure on Karg Island. Iran retaliates by attacking oil facilities across the entire Gulf region. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait all get hit. Oil production across the region collapses. We are not talking about 21 million barrels per day disrupted anymore. We are talking about 40 to 50 million barrels per day offline. That is half of global oil production. Oil prices spike to $200 per barrel or higher. Gas hits $8, $9, $10 per gallon. Diesel hits 12 to 15. The global economy crashes. Hit that notification bell, because if worst case starts happening, you need to know immediately. Stock markets collapse. We enter a depression. I am not trying to scare you. I am trying to prepare you. Worst case is unlikely, but it is possible. And even if we avoid worst case, middle case is still really painful. Gas at $4 per gallon for months is going to hurt family budgets badly. So what can you do about it? Let me give you practical advice. First, reduce your driving if possible. Carpool to work. Combine errands into one trip instead of multiple. Work from home if your job allows it. Every gallon you do not burn is money saved. If this video helped you understand what is happening and how to protect yourself, share it with everyone you know. If you were driving 500 miles per week and you cut that to 400, you save 4 gallons per week. At $4 per gallon, that is $16 per week, or about $832 per year. Second, if you are in the market for a car, prioritize fuel efficiency. A car that gets 35 miles per gallon instead of 25 saves you a huge amount of money. Using the same 12,000 miles per year example, 35 mpg uses 343 gallons per year. 25 mpg uses 480. That is a difference of 137 gallons. At $4 per gallon, that is $548 saved every year. Over 5 years, that is $2,740. That could be the difference between affording a slightly more expensive fuel-efficient car or not. Third, budget for higher prices on everything, not just gas. Groceries, shipping costs, airfare, anything that involves transportation is going up. Look at your monthly budget and add 10 to 15% to categories like food and household goods. Cut spending in discretionary areas if you can. Entertainment, dining out, subscriptions you do not really need. This is temporary. When the war ends and oil prices normalize, you can go back to normal spending. But for the next few months, tighten up. Fourth, if you have investments, be careful. High oil prices are bad for the stock market. Companies have higher costs. Consumers spend less on discretionary items because they are spending more on gas. Economic growth slows. Stocks tend to drop. If you are young and have decades until retirement, do not panic sell. Ride it out. Markets always recover eventually, but if you are close to retirement, talk to a financial advisor about reducing risk temporarily. This might not be the time to have 100% of your retirement savings in stocks. Fifth, consider energy alternatives if you can afford it. Solar panels for your home reduce electricity costs, which might go up as oil prices rise. An electric car eliminates gas costs entirely. A bike for short trips saves gas and is good for your health. I know not everyone can afford solar panels or a Tesla, but if you are in a position where you can invest in alternatives, now might be the time. Because if oil prices stay high for years, those investments pay off faster. Let me give you the bottom line, because this is not just about gas prices. This is about a fundamental disruption to the global economy. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. 21 million barrels of oil per day are not reaching the market. Oil prices have jumped from $70 to $103. Gas has gone from $2.93 to $3.72. And the math shows if this continues, gas will hit $5 per gallon within weeks. Your budget is about to get squeezed hard. Everything that depends on transportation is getting more expensive. The government is trying to help by releasing emergency reserves, but it is not enough. The only real solution is ending the war and reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Until that happens, prices will stay high or go higher. Prepare accordingly, cut unnecessary spending, drive less if you can, budget for higher costs. And understand this is not temporary inflation from government spending. This is a real supply shock caused by a war that shows no signs of ending. The economic pain is just beginning.